2026 is shaping up to be an absolutely thrilling year for horror game fans, and if you've been following the buzz around the genre, then you already know we're entering a period where terrifying experiences are coming from every corner of the gaming landscape. Early in the year alone, we have a lineup that spans from atmospheric narrative horror to survival focused classics rebuilt for modern audiences, and even inventive horror adventures that blend folklore with desperate survival mechanics. First up on the calendar, and one of the earliest entries, is Chrysal, Theater of Idols, a first person horror shooter from Vermilla Studios, published by Bloomhouse Games, that lands in February and promises a haunting visceral journey steeped in Spanish folklore and ritualistic terror. In Chrysal, players take on the role of Gabriel, a soldier chosen by a dying divine command who must traverse the nightmarish island of Tormentosa, where the line between sacred imagery and grotesque monstrosities is blurred and unsettling. This title has already drawn attention for its unique use of blood as both lifeblood and ammunition, forcing players into constant tension between survival and vulnerability, as every shot taken costs you part of yourself, and every corner turned might reveal another grotesque idol or occult inspired foe. Quissel highlights that horror doesn't have to be about dark corridors and jump scares alone. It can incorporate lore, symbolism, and survival elements that keep players on edge at every turn. Following shortly after on February 13th comes Reanimal, a game that represents a very different but equally compelling take on horror from the creators of Little Nightmares. Developed by Tossier Studios and published by THQ Nordic, Reanimal invites players into a hellish atmospheric world where a brother and sister must work together to survive and escape an island gone horribly wrong as they search for missing friends and uncover the grim secrets of their surroundings. What makes Reanimal stand out is both its emotional core and its willingness to blend horror with exploration, stealth, and puzzle elements, allowing it to capture dread through its environment and creature encounters rather than relying solely on cheap shocks. The game supports both single player with AI companion support and local or online co op play, and this flexibility means that Reanimal can be a shared nightmare or a solitary descent into fear, each offering a distinct emotional weight and tension. Early previews hint at grotesque monsters and moments designed to disturb through their uncanny design, while the narrative structure and environmental storytelling keep you deeply invested in every step you take toward freedom. Just a couple of weeks later, we're set to see one of the genre's biggest legacy titles return with Resident Evil Requiem, the ninth mainline installment in Capcom's iconic survival horror franchise. With a release slated for late February, the new chapter shifts back toward the classic Resident Evil flow by reconnecting with the wider narrative of the first six games rather than the more recent standalone story arcs, and places you in the shoes of FBI analyst Grace Ashcroft as she investigates the eerie and collapsing world around Raccoon City and the enigmatic Glenwood Hotel. Resident Evil has always been about tension, resource management, and creating dread through atmosphere and unpredictability, and Requiem promises to lean into those strengths while remaining fresh and surprising for both returning fans and newcomers alike. After the encouraging survival horror resurgence of entries like Resident Evil 7 and Village, Requiem seems poised to expand on that foundation with deeper narrative threads tied into the franchise's broader mythology, offering both nostalgia and new terror in equal measure. March 12th brings another heavyweight return in Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly Remake, a full remake of one of the most beloved entries in the Fatal Frame series that originally released in 2003. This remake isn't just a visual refresh, it reimagines the classic survival horror experience by enhancing graphics, sound design, and gameplay mechanics while preserving the core elements that made the original so unforgettable. The haunting ghost encounters, the oppressive atmosphere of All God's Village, and the signature camera obscura that lets you capture and seal spirits through terrifying photography. Notable additions like new areas, side stories, and expanded storytelling deepen the emotional core of the game, while gameplay features such as refined camera mechanics and the holding hands mechanic that reinforces the bond between the twin protagonists give both longtime fans and newcomers fresh ways to experience the chilling tale. Collaborations with other horror franchises have been released as post launch content, adding even more layers of surprise and cross community appeal for fans of multiple horror subgenres. With Fatal Frame 2's release, early 2026 cements itself as a rare moment where classic horror sensibilities and modern design philosophies intersect to create something that respects its roots while pushing forward. Just a couple weeks after Fatal Frame 2 arrives Project Songbird, a psychological first person horror experience developed by Fire Games that promises to unsettle players in a completely different way. Launching on March 26, Project Songbird cast you as Dakota, a musician suffering from crippling writer's block who retreats to a remote log cabin in the Appalachian forest to find inspiration, only to discover that the woods have their own terrifying demands and mysteries. The game places heavy emphasis on atmosphere, exploration, and haunting narrative moments rather than relying on gore or jump scares, delivering a compact yet intensely immersive experience that uses voice acting, dynamic sound design, and emotionally charged storytelling to creep under your skin. As Dakota's grip on reality falters and the environment becomes increasingly surreal and unsettling, Project Songbird uses its psychological foundation to build a creeping dread that stays with you beyond the playtime. For fans of horror that makes you think as much as it makes you jump, this title could be one of the standout indie horror experiences of the year. Taken together, these five games Crystal, Theater of Idols, Reanimal, Resident Evil Requiem, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly Remake, and Project Songbird showcase how diverse and creatively rich the horror genre has become in early 2026. Whether you're drawn to the visceral folklore infused horror of Crystal, the emotional and cooperative tension of Reanimal, the narrative death and survival horror legacy of Resident Evil Requiem, the atmospheric dread of a faithful Fatal Frame remake, or the psychological unease of Project Songbird, there's something on the horizon to satisfy every kind of horror fan. This period truly feels like a renaissance for horror games where both indie innovation and classic franchises are delivering experiences that respect what makes the genre terrifying while pushing players into chilling new territories. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you want to support my channel, check out my Patreon, where the latest exclusive is where I look at games that changed their genre forever. Thanks for watching, and as always, game on.